You step onto the platform. The train is already there. You have 4 seconds before the doors close. You make it. The person behind you makes it. The person behind them makes it. Nobody ran. Nobody pushed. Nobody missed. You check the screen. Next train, 2 minutes 30 seconds. You think this is just an efficient subway. It isn't. You just passed through the most precise physical manifestation of a 600-year-old cultural operating system ever built. Its name is Pali-Pali, and Seoul didn't just adopt it, Seoul engineered it into concrete. This is K-Logic Field Test, and today we decode the blueprint. Seoul Metro moves 7 million passengers every single day. That number is worth sitting with. 7 million individual human beings, each with a destination, a schedule, a varying level of urgency, flowing through 23 lines, 700 stations, across one of the most densely populated urban environments on the planet, every day, with an on-time performance rate that consistently exceeds 99%. For context, the London Underground moves approximately 3 million daily and routinely struggles with delays. The New York subway moves around 3.5 million and has spent decades under scrutiny for reliability failures. Tokyo's system, widely considered the gold standard of global metro operations, is the only comparable benchmark. The standard explanation for Seoul Metro's performance is infrastructure investment. Korea spent aggressively on transit development from the 1970s onward. The technology is modern, the stations are clean, the signaling systems are sophisticated. All of this is true, and all of it misses the actual reason. Because infrastructure alone does not explain why Seoul Metro works the way it does. Plenty of cities have invested heavily in metro infrastructure and still produce chaotic, inefficient systems. The hardware is necessary, but not sufficient. What Seoul has that most cities don't is a cultural operating system that was already optimized for exactly this kind of system before the first tunnel was ever dug. Pali-Pali, the Korean cultural imperative of speed, urgency, and compressed time, didn't emerge from Seoul Metro. Seoul Metro was built to serve Pali-Pali. The infrastructure was designed around a population that already understood at a deeply instinctive level that time is not to be wasted, that flow is to be maintained, and that the individual's pace must synchronize with the collective's rhythm. The result is not just an efficient subway, it is a physical laboratory where one of Korea's most powerful cultural algorithms has been given concrete form and tested at scale 7 million times a day.
To read Seoul Metro as a field test, you need to know what data points to look for. Data point 1. The yellow lines are not a safety feature. They are a flow algorithm. Every Seoul Metro platform has precise yellow markings on the floor, not just edge warnings, but boarding queue positions at exact door locations. Passengers form orderly lines at these positions without any enforcement, without any announcement, without any visible authority figure ensuring compliance. This is Pali-Pali in its most elegant form. The queue is not about politeness, it is a collective optimization. Each passenger instinctively understanding that disordered boarding creates friction, and friction slows the system, and a slower system means everyone loses time. The individual disciplines themselves not because they are told to, but because the cultural OS has already run the calculation. Synchronized flow is faster for everyone. Compare this to subway systems in cities without this cultural foundation. The boarding chaos at many major metros, where passengers push against exiting riders, where queues dissolve into crowds, where every door becomes a negotiation, is not a character flaw. It is the absence of a shared operating protocol. Data point 2. The transfer corridors are compressed urgency made physical. Seoul Metro's transfer passages between lines are among the longest of any metro system in the world. Some transfers require walking 400, 500, even 600 meters underground.
In most cities, this would be experienced as an inconvenience, a design flaw that adds unwanted time to the journey. In Seoul, it is experienced as a race. Not a stressed, anxious race, a purposeful one. The pace in Seoul Metro transfer corridors is measurably faster than street walking pace. Passengers shift gears the moment they enter the underground environment, as if the system itself triggers a behavioral mode switch. Pali-Pali activates. The corridor becomes a track. Data point 3. The real-time information architecture assumes a Pali-Pali user. Every Seoul Metro station displays real-time arrival information, not just in minutes, but in seconds in car positions. The system tells you not just when the next train arrives, but which car to board to be closest to your exit at your destination, optimizing the entire journey, door to door, before you even step on the train. This level of informational precision only makes sense if the user population is already operating at Pali-Pali speed, already optimizing, already calculating, already treating every second as a variable to be managed. The system was designed for users who want this data, because the cultural OS already created users who need it. Here is what the field data reveals when you step back far enough to see the full picture. Pali-Pali is almost universally misread by outside observers. The word translates literally as hurry, hurry, and most international visitors experience it as pressure. The restaurant server who refills your water before you've noticed it's empty. The construction project completed in a time frame that seems physically impossible. The colleague who sends a follow-up message before you've finished reading the first one. The instinctive Western read. This is a stressful culture that doesn't know how to slow down. The K-logic read. This is a culture that developed a radical relationship with time as a survival mechanism, and Seoul Metro is its most visible physical proof. Korea compressed what took most developed nations a century of industrial development into approximately 30 years. That compression was not accidental, it was cultural. A society that had survived colonial erasure and war and emerged with almost no material infrastructure made a collective decision, encoded into every institution, every system, every individual behavioral pattern, that time could not be wasted, that speed was not a preference, it was an obligation. Pali-Pali is not impatience, it is the logical output of a people who understood at a generational level that delay has consequences, that momentum must be maintained, in that the gap between where Korea was and where Korea needed to be could only be closed by treating every unit of time as precious. Seoul Metro is the monument to that understanding. The 99% on-time performance rate is not a technical achievement, it is a cultural one. It exists because 7 million people per day arrive at platforms already synchronized to the system's rhythm, already running Pali-Pali, already optimized, already treating the 4 seconds before the doors close not as a deadline, but as a contract. The infrastructure serves the culture maintains the infrastructure. The system is self-reinforcing in a way that no amount of engineering investment alone could ever produce. The modern world has an infrastructure problem, not a funding problem, not a technology problem, a cultural problem. Cities around the world are spending billions on transit systems that underperform, not because the engineering is inadequate, but because the cultural operating system required to make them work at full capacity doesn't exist. You can build the hardware, you cannot install the software through investment alone. Seoul Metro works because Pali-Pali works, and Pali-Pali works because it is not a policy, it is not a campaign, it is not a set of rules posted on a platform wall. It is a deeply encoded cultural value that was forged under pressure, refined through collective urgency, and transmitted across generations until it became instinctive. The traveler who arrives in Seoul and experiences the metro for the first time almost always has the same reaction. Something feels different here. The flow, the precision, the strange collective agreement that everyone seems to have made without ever discussing it. That feeling is correct. Something is different. What you are feeling is the presence of a cultural OS running underneath the physical infrastructure, invisible, seamless, and more powerful than any engineering specification ever written. For the modern traveler, understanding this changes the experience entirely. The packed rush hour car that somehow never feels chaotic. The transfer corridor that feels like a choreographed movement rather than a crowd. The platform queue that forms without anyone asking. These are not accidents of good design. They are field test results. Proof that when a cultural system and a physical system are built around the same underlying logic, the output exceeds what either could produce alone. Seoul Metro is not the world's best subway because Korea spent the most money. It is the world's best subway because Korea encoded its most powerful cultural value into concrete, and then sent 7 million people a day through it to prove the point. K-Logic, field test complete. The blueprint was always visible. You just needed to know what you were looking at.